Hey guys, welcome back to the O Word Podcast. It's your host, Koerri Elijah, and today's podcast is a great one. We have another special guest for you guys, Danny Villanueva Jr. He's a Mexican-American screenwriter slash director from Chicago, Illinois. He studied digital filmmaking and video production at the Art Institute of Wisconsin in Milwaukee. In 2012, he launched a horror-themed web channel, How Bizarre, which featured short films, mini documentaries, and bite-sized cartoons. In 2017, the channel evolved into an independent film production company, How Bizarre Pictures, and I Dream of a Psychopomp is Villanueva's feature-length directorial debut. It was nice to catch up with Danny. We haven't spoken in such a long time, but it was great to reconnect, get into his past, get into the film that's going to be released later on in the year or early next year. You're not going to want to miss this at all. It was a great conversation, especially for people that are aspiring to be filmmakers or even actors. You know, there's a lot of substance in our conversation. Don't want to miss any of that, and that starts right now. So Danny Villanueva Jr., thank you so much for joining me, man. It's been a long time since we've actually had a real conversation, but I definitely appreciate you taking out the time to be on the podcast. Um, you know, how you been, over this period of time that we haven't spoken or seen each other? I know you've been up to a lot, but how have things been for you in your personal life and stuff?
Yeah, well, first off, thanks for having me. This is really cool to be talking to you right now. I know it's been a decade since we actually had seen each other, so it's really cool to see you're active, and doing all types of stuff yourself. But me, life has been going. There's a lot of ups and downs, of course, but been trying to just stay focused on my career and just going with the flow of what the world is and what life brings. But yeah, this year has been a little tough for me. I lost my mother, which was a really big deal. I was always a mama's boy. Um, so yeah. Besides that, life's been okay.
That's what's up. Yeah, and it has been a crazy year, man. And condolences. I'm sorry to hear about your mother, man. I know how it is to lose a parent, so it definitely is something rough. It definitely can affect you. But I mean, you got to keep on pressing on. I'm sure you understand that already. And, you have your dreams, and like the number one thing I'm sure that she would want you to do is to not allow her passing or her not being around to prevent you from continuing on doing what you love, and what she would have loved to see you continue to grow and do. So condolences for that, man. And also everything with the pandemic. I mean, I've definitely felt the brunt of this as well. It definitely is a big setback, especially in entertainment. You with filmmaking, I'm sure it definitely has affected your schedule. Me, I do a lot of hostings and things at conventions and stuff like that. Pretty much my entire schedule has been slashed. So, it's been a rough year, but I'm not gonna allow it to stop me from smiling or continue to achieve my goals. We're gonna just keep on doing what we're doing. So, man, so we go back to high school, man. I had no idea that you were into film the way that you are. What got you into film? Was it something that you've always been into since like you were a kid? Is it something maybe later in your life that you stumbled upon? What was it that had you pinpoint like, hey, I'm gonna go to college, I'm gonna learn how to be a filmmaker, and I'm gonna do this thing?
Yeah, well, it definitely grew. I guess it all started when I was very young, probably the first 10 years of my life. My three older, well, I have many older siblings, but there were three in particular that were in their 20s when I was, just a child, and they loved films and especially horror. And I think that's where I got everything from. When you're a child, the line between reality and fiction is kind of vague. So when you're watching films, you're not like so sure what it is you're watching. Sometimes You feel like this might actually be real life, just that you don't know there's a crew behind there creating this, so all, like, I think that's why when you're young, fantasy films are such a big deal, because you're seeing this fantastical side, this otherworldly, life that you're not used to seeing with, in the real world. And horror is another genre that has that. It does have a lot of fantastical elements: vampires, witches, ghosts. And the thing about horror, though, is that there's something about when you're scared at such a young age. I think it carries with you. You're thinking about it a lot more than, say, watching wizards fight. When you're alone in your room at night, there's certain things that trigger this feeling, and it can really get under your skin, and it kind of it goes along with you throughout your life. So I think it's like fear is just this kind of emotion that can be brought back strongly throughout any time of your life. Everyone is scared of things. And I think there's a lot of nostalgia that comes with that. Like years later, I'm like going back to these films from my childhood and remembering where I was at the time when I saw them and what I felt. And it's just something, it's kind of like a roller coaster. It's this thrill where, you're strapped in, you know that you're kind of safe, but, you're just scared shitless. And I just kind of fell in love with that. And so I'm like huge into like anything spooky. And that's where my love of film started, with horror. But throughout the years, I started to appreciate all kinds of cinema. And I started to learn like what it takes to make films, what all these positions are. I've always kind of been the guy carrying around the camera. When I was a kid, me and my brother would skateboard all the time. So it was just, everyone who skateboards, they got a friend with a camera and that's going to film, And I would cut together skate videos. And I've had a lot of like passions throughout the years. I was super into basketball, super into skateboarding, for example, but a lot of those things kind of like faded away. I wasn't completely set on that being something I was crazy about, but filmmaking always stuck with me. And over the years, it just grew stronger and stronger, and to the point where I'm like obsessed with it. And I think to do something your entire life, you really do have to be obsessed if you want to give 100%. Like, you're going to dedicate a lot of your time to trying to be great at something. But also, filmmaking is not an easy thing. Like, there's so much involved and so much, it's a never-ending learning process. And what I love about it is that every new project is so fresh. It's like you're starting a whole new kind of career. It's like I'm a writer director, so I start off in the writing process. And a lot of people say, write what you know, but I think it's counterproductive, because there's so much to learn. If there's something that intrigues you, you can spend all the time you need and want to research it, learn about people and cultures and things, and bring them into your story. And it's like there's so much discovery that goes on when you're writing. And then when it comes to production, you're meeting new people. You know, you're finding all these talented artists that you're bringing together to create this one piece. So it really really excites me, and I if I wasn't filmmaking, I don't know, like I'd probably be super depressed. Like I don't know what else I would do. I don't really have too many other interests that I'm crazy about.
Yeah, I definitely feel that, man. Especially the how you were saying, like the nostalgic feeling of the experience of watching films, you know. Uh I like horror films. I wouldn't say they're necessarily my favorite, but I can recognize like the thrill. It's almost like people that love going on roller coasters, you know, or love haunted houses or whatever it may be. It's just you know that everything's going to be okay for the most part. I mean, there's a slight chance that things could go wrong. Things, you know, things can always go left in any situation, but for the most part,
And actually break into your house while you're watching the movie.
right, you know, and I mean, if you were gonna go out anyway, like if you're gonna go out by the hands of a serial killer, I guess maybe that would be the most poetic way for it to happen. But
Right.
I definitely agree with, you know, just things, especially being young, loving things. Like I've always loved like comic books and stuff like that. So now, especially, you know, I've gone through, you know, a bunch of different things too, like skateboarding too, you know, things like that that you kind of adapt to through your peers and things of that nature. But that one thing that you kind of like that sits in your heart that you remember as a kid, and then like even like when you reach your teen years and you might go off and try other things, it's like always going to have a spot in your heart. And then, you know, you get to the age where you're a little bit older, you're an adult, you have, you know, time to kind of, you know, think about stuff, you know, think about exactly what you want to do, where you want to be, what goals that you really want. And then you kind of go back to those original feelings, those things that you loved once before that maybe you pushed to the side for a little bit because you were, whether you're trying to not necessarily fit in, but kind of discover, you know, who you really were or whatever. But what I've been noticing, especially with our generation, a lot of people are tapping back into those things that they truly love. You know, some of it is circumstantial. You know, some people may have gone to school for one thing and then things didn't pan out because of the economy and just how things, the cards we were dealt with our generation. And now they're tapping back in and saying, hey, I'm just going to try to do the things that I love. Or they just were always, you know, always on that path and we're going to do that. So I love to see what you're doing. I love to see that our generation is actually trying to make a way for ourselves. Um, so yeah, it's definitely awesome. So your YouTube channel. So initially you started just making little videos on your channel. Did that start with when you were in school or?
Yeah, so I always made skate videos, and then I started to do these little silly like narrative spoof skits with my friends. Um, and then once I started to learn the process of filmmaking, and I felt like I knew enough where I can tell a serious story without it coming off completely silly, um, I started to take it more serious. So in 2012, I launched Tabazar. It started off as a web channel before it became my production company. Um, and this was my way of just bringing in everything, every kind of horror kind of content that I loved growing up. So I was big into anthology shows, Tales from the Crypt, Goosebumps, and just Twilight Zone, like all those. I loved ghost lore, so I would watch tons of documentaries about ghost hunting and these, urban legends and stuff like that. And I also liked horror animation, so I kind of wanted to just be able to, I guess, experiment with all those things and create uh, a platform where I can share that with people. So this was really just made to kind of get out everything that's been inside of me and wanting to experiment and showcase stuff and try to start to build an audience, because I know how important that is, um, especially when you're not really connected. You don't really have too many connections or anything that's going to get a lot of people to watch your stuff. You kind of just got to build your own community.
Mm.
So yeah, I started making short films. And these were really just friends and family, like one man band kind of films. I would do every job. I would operate the camera. I would hang boom mics from the ceiling because I had no one to hold it. I'd use my grandmother for as an actor, my girlfriend, like anyone who was there, like they would have no interest in acting, but I'd just be like asking them, like, please, begging them, and they would just be like, okay, whatever, what do you want me to do? So I was doing those, and then I experimented with like documentary style stuff. Uh, I had a segment called Eerie Destinations where I went to places with dark or haunted history and just did little informational documentary segments on them. And then I had a segment called Tiny Terror Tunes, where these very bite-sized horror-themed cartoons, and that was just me experimenting with animation, and well, it's kind of had a humorous side, so I needed to let that out somehow, uh, because a lot of my films that are serious and like horror, uh, uh, not a lot of comedy finds its way into them, although I have made horror comedy shorts. But I think I kind of needed to get that out of my system too, to see, can I be funny? Um, but yeah, I just started to create a lot of content and try to get subscribers, get people to kind of start to follow me. But the end goal was always to make a feature length film, feature length films uh, as a career. So after a while, uh, it got to a point where everyone's like, dude, make a feature. Like, you're doing all these shorts for such little money. Come up with some money and, you know, do, do something real. And I knew like I was getting to an age where like I need to support myself comfortably. I don't want to be like broke forever. I need to turn this into a somewhat of a profitable career, or at least to just make ends meet. I don't mind living a minimalist lifestyle as long as I can create. Um, so started to really dive into learning about the business side of filmmaking, which is a completely different ballpark from just the creative creative stuff. Um, so much to it, and this is not like it's not something I want to do forever. Like I do business stuff, like but it's out of necessity. I had to produce this myself. I'm not gonna wait around until Hollywood comes and gives me a phone call and says, "We want you to direct." Like
Right.
you kind of gotta build your own, build your own career, your own empire, and you just gotta like I didn't know anyone. I had no connections, and when I did go to film school, I did meet a few people, but I didn't have enough where I can like call everyone and be like, let's make a movie. So it was starting just from scratch basically. Like I had to reach out and find cast and crew myself to get it started. But yeah, that's how Bizarre Pictures originated.
Yeah, and I think and that's an awesome story, just deciding like, hey man, I need a way to be able to get myself out there, release these ideas that I have, and I mean, it's working, I mean, I'm looking at your channel right now. You're over 750,000 views on your channel. You know, tons of feedback from people, and now you're working on your first, feature film. I Dream of a Psychopomp. And you're dealing with a micro budget, but I mean, it's a $25,000 budget is, coming from where you started, getting to the point where now you have a decent amount of money to work with, to get yourself kind of in a more professional setting, and then from there being able to just continue on and launch, because it's steps. You're going to start maybe as a minimalist, but eventually you're going to get yourself to the point where more people will recognize, and especially now in this day and age where you know a lot of people, before, we assumed we'd have to go to places like Hollywood or we'd have to move to New York. But now we're starting to see, especially now with everything that's happened with, the pandemic, a lot of the people in those areas are actually moving out of those areas, and more communities are starting to build. Over the past 10 years, like we've seen Atlanta grow, exponentially. Down in Louisiana, there's a big film scene down there as well. Chicago is not bad either, and we're in the area, especially in a state like Wisconsin. Um, there's tons of different scenery, and I feel like this could also be a next one of the next hotbeds where filmmakers can actually start to grow. There's a lot of places you can go for different locations, whether you dealing with horror films. There's tons of eerie locations in Wisconsin. We have tons of cornfields, but then we also have cities and small towns and things like that. So there's tons of different locations for different sets and different scenes that you can deal with. So I'd love to see things grow here more. uh, I believe they will. I'd love to see, actually, personally, I'd love to see maybe even, the government potentially get involved with different, not necessarily loans, but different grants and things that they give to people in other states like that to kind of build up the community here more.
Yeah, the big thing is the tax incentives. Wisconsin has none, and that's why a lot of people aren't shooting films here. Um, with bigger budgets, like there's a lot of small indie films who choose to shoot here, but that's the biggest thing that's keeping people from doing it. So hopefully we can get that over here. But yeah, I do think that now that filmmaking is much more accessible, you can get equipment for super cheap, and you can make films for such little money. Before this, film stock alone would cost thousands of dollars, and now people can pretty much make a full-length film for no money. So wherever they're at, um, they can do it. And yeah, Wisconsin does have a lot of beautiful locations, and there are many places in our country and in the world that kind of haven't been seen on a lot of films. So I mean, there's a lot of territory that can be explored. Uh, so.
Most definitely. So let's get into your film, I Dream of a Psychopomp. So this is written, produced, and it's directed, your directorial debut, um, by you. It's co-written by J. Anthony Ramos. Um, so I read the synopsis of the film, and it kind of goes back to when you were talking about the types of films that you loved, like the like Tales from the Crypt and things like that. I kind of get that vibe based off of the synopsis that I read. So coming up with the idea for the film, how did that come about? Is it something, an idea that you had? Did you have like a random conversation with the co-writer? How did this idea come?
Well, it definitely was born inside of me. And when I try to think about this question, like it's not something that I'm conscious of until I start to reflect and see, you know, what had brought me to wanting to dive into this kind of world and tell these kind of stories. Um, but besides me always being in love with horror, this film is different in a way because I would consider it a supernatural drama slash horror, and that's what I label it because the horror elements are kind of secondary. Like a lot of it feels like a drama film. Those diehard horror junkies might be angry when they watch it, and then cinephiles who just appreciate cinema might appreciate this. It's like it's kind of uh, uh, I don't know. It's hard to like. I know it's a genre film. I know it's horror because there's vampires, ghosts, uh, and all that. But like the stories, they're not about that. They just happen to like reality grounded stories dealing with characters who have problems that anyone could have, real life, real world problems, but they just happen to exist in a world where there's vampires and ghosts and psychics but it's about death at its core. This film titled "I Dream of a Psychopomp," and what psychopomps are, they're soul guides. So they help transition ghosts that are stuck on Earth into the afterlife. Uh, the Grim Reaper is probably the most popular, at least in America, of any kind of psychopomps. But they've been around for so long in many different cultures. Anubis from ancient Egypt was a psychopomp. Hermes in Greek mythology, and shamans, they psychopomp. They go through meditation. They find ghosts and their spirits and talk to them and help them come to terms with death, so they can cross over. But I've always had that image. I love the image of the Grim Reaper and what he is, and there's this big misconception that he's this big bad scary guy and he like brings death, but really it's not what happens. Once you're dead, then he arrives and he's doing you a favor. He's they say that ghosts are on Earth because they have unfinished business or they don't know they're dead, and it can be like just stressful for them. They're not at peace. So like these psychopomp figures, they help you know give ghosts peace. So this is the sense, the perspective from a believer. Me, I'm open-minded to the existence of ghosts, but I'm very much a skeptic. I'm super big into science, and I just haven't had enough experiences to convince myself that there's ghosts. So I take kind of approach this as fiction. So I look at ghosts as grief, trauma, missed opportunities, and just more of a psychological sense that the ghosts come from our minds. And the film does have ghosts in conventional sense. They appear, they're there. I do follow a lot of tropes of ghost films, but the characters who are experiencing this, uh, they're traumatized, and they have reasons why they're seeing these these beings. And psychopumping to me is helping give closure to people and helping people grieve. Um, And throughout my research, I interviewed a lot of like funeral directors and grieving families to try and find a reality grounded way to approach psychopumping. And I think funeral directors have a job that's pretty similar to it. Uh, they help grieving families overcome death, and psychopomps help the deceased overcome death. So one of the main characters is a funeral director, but he's like during his his awake life, and his, I guess, otherworldly job is to be a psychopomp. Um, but when I start to think about personal, reasons why I wanted to get into this dark of subject, because it's like death is this film isn't fun to watch. Like some people might find it depressing, although it has a lot of heart. There's a lot of like happy endings. Uh, this is like touchy. It's touchy to get so deep into death. And before this, I never really experienced the death of a close one, but has always been my fear. Uh, when I was born, my father had already passed away. He was actually murdered, and my mother became an addict. And when I was 1 year old, I was adopted to my grandparents, who had raised me their entire life. And like I said before, I was always a mama's boy. Had a super close relationship with them. I probably lived with them about 28, 29 years of my 31-year-old life. And my worst fear was losing them. And I knew that their lives weren't as going to be as long from the perspective of how long I've been living, that, compared to other people my age, their parents, they still have a while before their parents are going to pass away. So I knew like it was kind of close.
Mm-hmm.
And I was so afraid of it that I wanted to start to prepare myself. And I thought the best way to do it is to just familiarize myself with death in the process and try to understand it as best I can. So when it does happen, that I can process it easier. And yeah, just this February, right before the lockdown, my mother was diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer. And I was her primary caregiver. So I spent uh, pretty much 24 hours next to her up until she passed on Memorial Day in May. And throughout this time, I was also editing this film. Um, so I think in a way that it kind of was working. It was therapeutic to me. Of course, it was very painful, very hard. Um, Mostly, I had a lot of anticipatory grief leading up to her death. So when it did happen, I almost I was like kind of shocked that I was able to handle it so well. And I think it was in part due to this film and learning about death and the grieving process. And I like think it was just like the universe had just aligned right where it was towards the end of finishing this film when I was hit with this. Um, so yeah, that's kind of where the film had come from.
Nice. When you and this is just a little sidetracking, but I didn't have any idea personally that your life experience was what it was. I have certain parallels with my life as well. Like my father wasn't murdered, and condolences for that. But I've never met him. My mother also was still a struggling addict, so I was adopted by my grandmother as well. And she raised me since I was 8 weeks old, and she passed when I was 20. And one thing, I wish I was prepared for, especially being that young, was dealing with the grief. It's one of those things where I also kind of knew it wouldn't be that long before it had happened. Um, but it just kind of shows like a level of maturity and like groundedness that you have, where you foresaw something would happen, so you took the necessary steps to kind of prepare yourself as an individual. And I think that takes a special type of person to be able to recognize things in the future, and prepare themselves in advance, because a lot of people don't operate with foresight. And now I try to do it more, just based off of life experiences, not being prepared for certain things that were inevitable. So I just want to say, condolences, but also hats off to you for, preparing yourself, and being grounded enough to be able to recognize and, realize that things are going to be a certain way in the future to prepare yourself. And that, you being in post while all of this is happening, and you being in the editing process, it also just kind of really makes me want to see the film more, just to kind of see how your personal struggles, your personal pain while being in post kind of may have affected the editing, and how some things may have turned out, or how you place certain things. So
And another side note, which is just this weird coincidence, that J. Anthony Ramos, who is a co-writer, he helped write for one of the segments. We wrote the story together. He wrote the screenplay for it. But this particular segment is about a girl who has cancer, and she's trying to come to terms with her being terminally ill. And both his mother and my mother had been diagnosed with cancer after writing that. It was just this weird thing to me, and I think that his mother has beat it, which is super cool. But I think that he probably, this had helped him along the way as well. Like, I feel like art is so therapeutic in ways, and I don't know, like, it's just strange how things like that happen. But yeah,
right, how the universe kind of can converge everything together at a moment where you may not have even realized that you were on a similar path, but the project opens up, that in your mind. It's like, oh man, this is almost surreal that we're both kind of experiencing the same thing while we were on this path together that we didn't realize connected us in a way. Yeah, that's so with the process, casting and all of that stuff, how did all of that go for you? I know, especially writing and having ideas of characters, I was always intrigued by, how well some casting directors were with certain films, or, certain books that are adapted into film, and then you kind of have an idea of a character, but then you actually almost see the character that you had in your mind. With you, especially, being independent, how was the casting process? I imagine everyone you selected you were incredibly happy with, but was it a struggle trying to find people that fit your idea, or how did that go?
Yeah, to me, casting is the most difficult part, and I think when people don't take enough time to do it, that it's really evident in their films, because it's so important that the actors can embody the characters. Otherwise, the characters will, they'll suffer. But I used Backstage.com, which is it's similar to like Facebook. Actors have profiles with all their info, description, their reels, headshots, and casting directors can go in, post projects, and then the actors can apply to them, and then you can review their profile. If you think they're a good candidate, you can have them audition. So you send them some sides. But it's really hard for me to cast. There was one role or a few roles that had almost 500 submissions, and I was still like nervous, like not knowing like, am I making the right decision? And it's mainly because this is kind of new to me, and I sometimes get too married to the character that I imagine in my head, and you have to kind of let that go, and like it's a collaboration between an actor and this character. They're gonna join together, they're gonna combine, and that's who it's gonna be. When you're writing, sometimes you can have such detailed ideas, like what this person really looks like and sounds like, their mannerisms, and not all of that you can capture when you work with an actor. You try to get your vision to be as clear as it is in your head and translate it onto screen, but there's so much you kind of got to let go. When you know you've cast someone right is when you're not feeling too married to what you originally had in your head. And you say, wow, this person has this fresh take, or this is better than what I imagined. Like, they're doing it right, and you're very satisfied. There's been times where within getting 5 audition tapes or even less, I find the person. I'm like, that's who I need. That's what I want. And I stop searching. There's other times where I'm not completely sold and I need second takes. So I'll ask for a second audition to do a different portion of the screenplay to see what kind of range they have, until I'm confident, because casting is so important. So many people say that directing or casting is 90% of directing, or I forgot the number, but it's so important. And I completely agree with that, because those characters are they're what's going to tell your story, not a fancy shot of an exterior of a beautiful lake. That's not going to tell your story. Those do add to it, but you're really relying on your cast. They're the most important things in your film. But I was very, very lucky to get such an amazing cast. A lot of the actors are like first-time actors. Some may have theater backgrounds, but never been in a film. And other actors are like straight from Hollywood films. One of my leads, Jillian Lebling, she played Tom Hanks' daughter in The Bridge of Spies. And she was directed by Steven Spielberg, worked with Tom Hanks, had scenes with him, and her very next film, she comes and works on my set, and I'm like freaking out. How am I supposed to get her to trust me? She was just working with Spielberg. But she was like super professional, and like she cared about the film and the story so much, and it was super easy to work with her. And like what I hear from everyone else is that like indie film sets aren't too much different than uh, big budget films. Only difference is uh, the scale. Like, you
Mm.
know, you get bigger sets, you can hire more people, pay people better, eat better food, you know. So I totally got that from that experience. Um, and then there's a lot of actors who I did, like, had no idea existed and were nearby too. Um, a lot of them are from Kenosha, and man, they completely blew me away. Like, there's so much hidden talent out there, and they're just like looking for opportunities. And you know, some people have trouble trying to. But acting, I feel like it's so hard to get cast in any kind of role. Like, there's so many people out there submitting, and you know, you're like, this character is so specific that there's only one or two or a couple people that can really play this right, and trying to find them is difficult, you know. So I feel for actors. They have to be on like a constant grind and, you know, really be hustling to get jobs. Like, I know people who are just auditioning daily and like taking the train to auditions and just busting their ass because they want it so bad, and you know that's what you have to do. Um, but yeah, I mean, I love working with actors. I love the feeling of casting someone right. I love being on set or even rehearsing and starting to see things come to life. Wardrobe fittings, you know, just anything that is getting closer to the character. It's just such a good feeling. But I find casting to be the most stressful, but there's such a big payoff when you finally find that person.
Nice. And before we close out here, man, I just wanted to know, like, dream project. Say you have an unlimited budget. You don't necessarily have to give me like a concept, but who would you want to work with? Maybe co-producers, lead actors.
Ooh, that's difficult. Like, it really depends on the project. Like, some of my favorite actors, uh, I like try to think like, what if I was able to work with them? And I'm starting to think like, wait, like, there's like, I don't know if they would fit in some one kind of my films, because you know, a lot of actors, they're character actors, or like they have certain styles that kind of have to work with the tone of your film. Um, but I mean, I guess some of my favorite actors, Joaquin Phoenix, it's amazing. Um, let's see, uh, Jake Gyllenhaal. Um, I don't know. There's so many, and it all
Mhm.
depends on what kind of film I'm making. Like, there's a lot of newcomers too. Ashton Sanders. I really dig what he's doing. I would love to work with him. He's a younger dude. Um, there's a lot of names I can't even think of either. I'm just seeing faces.
Mhm.
But yeah, I don't know. It's hard to think about that. But like, you know, like, I would love to work with Roger Deakins, the cinematographer. I just love his work, but like, I feel like I'd be too intimidated by him that I wouldn't, I wouldn't be able to like work with him. I don't see myself like telling him what to do. It's just great. um, but yeah, I don't know. I think it really all depends, like project to project. Um, I don't know.
Perfect.
That's
Well,
kind of a answer, but
no, especially like, I mean, you mentioned Joaquin Phoenix, Jake Gyllenhaal. They're both like very versatile actors, so I could see how those could be your picks, because you could kind of any scenario, any kind of film, I could see they could work themselves into, especially Joaquin. He's incredibly versatile. So
Yeah, and I think that them in particular, why I chose them, because they tend to do a lot of films that I really enjoy, and I could see them just existing in a world that I tell. I don't know, there's something about, you know, what they can do and how they can, you know, convey so much through just their eyes. And there's a lot of things that go into why I feel that way about them.
nice. So I Dream of a Psychopomp. We're looking at fall of 2020. Is the release date still on, or are we looking at maybe pushing it back a little?
I don't know. It's kind of up to what film festivals are starting to do, and when it's safe to go to the theaters, because I need to do a theatrical run. Like, that was my intention. I don't want to go straight to VOD. And we're creating a score that's made to be performed live for special kinds of event screenings. So it's really up to, like, the vaccine. If you want to know a release date, look at the release date of the vaccine. Good idea.
Right. No, I definitely feel that, man. Well, I'm super excited. I'm super pumped. If you do have a premiere locally or anything, please let me know, because I definitely want to show up and, you know, in support, man. But thank you so much for taking some time out of your day to talk to us here. Is there anything that you want to, you know, shout out or anything before we end?
No, just if you want to, like, share links to the Facebook page and the website to get people. So howbizarrepictures.com, you can sign up for the email list, and that'll keep you updated with the news on when the film's going to come, and all the other complimentary, like, content that's coming that goes along with the film up to the release.
Perfect. Awesome. Yeah, and you definitely want to sign up for that. You get a nice, like, high res poster of the film as well when you sign up. I got mine in my email, so you definitely want to have that and use that as your wallpaper, because it's a pretty dope graphic. So Danny, man, thank you so much for taking some time out of your day to talk to us, man. Everybody stay tuned. I Dream of a Psychopomp is coming soon. Depending on, you know, the whole pandemic, we'll get a release date soon. But please check out the website so you can stay up to date with everything that's going on. Danny, man, thank you so much again. We'll be in contact if you ever need anything in the future when it comes to maybe promotion, when around release time, anything like that. Just let me know. I'll help however I can. All right.
Will do. Thanks so much, Koerri.
Of course, man. Yep, you too, bro.